Welcome bread lovers. We're going to make a basic bread dough, and for that we'll need 500 grams of plain flour, a teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt and 1 sachet or 7 grams of dry or fresh yeast. We'll also need 320 milliliters of tepid water. Now, this recipe can be used for just making on the bench by hand. It can be used in a food mixer, but today I'm going to use the Thermomix because it has added features. You can pre-weigh and it also can heat the water. So at the bottom of the Thermomix machine it has 37 degrees. This is tepid water. So I have heated the water in this already for 2 minutes. And after I'd done that, I knocked the machine off and I added the 7 grams of dried yeast and I added the teaspoon of sugar. And I left it for 5 minutes. And what happens is the yeast ferments in the water and it feeds off the sugar and it rises to the top. This is the most important method for the bread. For best bread results, this yeast needs to be activated and it needs to be fed a little bit of sugar. Now once that's done, we can proceed by adding 500 grams of plain flour. Careful not to touch the bowl. Now this recipe can also be changed to make brown bread. Simply just add 250 grams of plain flour and 250 grams of wholemeal flour, and this will make a beautiful brown bread. Now there we are, 500 grams of plain flour, and now I add 1 teaspoon of salt. Okay, now I'm going to knead this for 2 minutes. Preferably all dough should be kneaded for 5. I'm going to do it for 2 minutes in the machine, and I'm going to do it for 3 minutes by hand on the bench. So now I'm going to set my Thermomix to the knead mode, which is symbolized by the little wheat picture, and I'm going to give that 2 minutes. Okay, the reason why we need the flour is to produce gluten. This is what separates bread from cakes. This is what makes bread chewy and gives us that lovely crust on the top. The yeast gives us the flavour. The sugar and salt helps with that. The gluten gives us the structure, the chewiness. And then we're going to see at the end of the process how to get a nice dark crust on the top. Now, as I said before, this recipe can also be done on the bench. Flour weighed out. You make a simple well in the centre. Add your fermented water to the centre and bring in the edges of flour gently until the dough is mixed. Also, food processor, same basis, just you don't have the food processor or food mixer making the tepid water for you. That's an added advantage with the Thermomix. Okay, now that's our dough. I'm going to take it out onto the work surface. Just be careful of the blades at the bottom. Thermomix is very sharp. If there's some cut around the bottom of the blade, I suggest you just leave it. Okay, now I'm just going to dust the bench very gently. Just fingers in the flour and flick on. You don't want to add any more flour to your dough. And we're going to knead. Now the way I knead is flatten it out, I fold it over, push it in, lift it, turn it, and do it the same again. And this is the method I use. Now when you're doing this, your dough should feel tacky, but not so much that it sticks to your hands. Like my hands have no dough, the bench has no dough, I don't have any flour, and it's not sticking. It wants to keep to itself. I think this could be left in the machine for the 5 minutes. I think the machine would do it. It's just out of practice. I like to do by hand. Now this dough should also be warm. It shouldn't feel heavy. When you push down on it to spread it out, you should feel the kind of bubbles leaving it, or the air bubbles leaving it. Also what you're doing here is when you spread it out like this, you're creating the gluten, which is important for bread, for the structure of the bread. And this is what you're doing. And when you start coming to the end of this process, you will feel the dough going very silky in the palm of your hand. And it'll be getting very, very smooth. And this is the reason why I like doing the 2 minutes by hand. Now I think that's very good. So what we just do is we just tuck it in at the bottom, and we get a nice round dough ball shape. And this we're going to transfer to a floured bowl, and this will sit in a warm area for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and it will rise. It will prove. This is called the prove stage. So that's going to prove. I have one here that has already proven. This is 45 minutes later. And what we're going to do now is we're going to knock it back. And this means to take all the air out of the dough. Okay. Now we simply just take all the air out of the dough, and we reform that lovely dough ball shape we had. And what we're doing here is we're folding in the open areas. As again, no flour needed. We're just tucking its bottom in on itself each time. And there we have a nice ball dough. Now at this stage you can flavour the dough. As I said before, you can put nuts, seeds, dried fruit, tomato and basil bread, grated courgette, honey, nuts, raisins. Anything can be done to flavour the bread at this stage, even a teaspoon of curry powder. Now we're going to shape the bread. Now there's lots of ways we can shape the bread. We could place this dough as it is on a baking tray and just cut the top of it and leave to rise for another 30 minutes and it'll be fit for the oven. We can distort the shape a little bit to what we like to see in some shops, nice loaf shape. or we can simply just, into a baking tray, into a bread box, simply just add some oil, take a little bit of kitchen paper, just work the oil around all the edges just to help from when the bread removes from the bread box, and I simply just dust down the box as well. Okay. Get that flour onto the edges. This just helps the bread release. Always leave a little bit just floating around in the bottom. And just simply pick the bread up. It's rectangle shape. Place it in the bread tin. And just get a very sharp knife. As sharp as you have. And what we're going to do is we're just going to 2 slashes into the bread. Any design can be done, but this just helps the bread when it rises that it knows which way to go. It won't just go into a funny shape on the top. It'll give you a nice dome shape. And what we need to do with this now is we need to cover this with a tea towel, and we need to let it rise for 35 to 45 minutes. And when that dough is ready, it will be at this stage. Okay, so this one here is ready for the oven. That's after 35-45 minutes. And to prepare it for the oven, I spray the top with water. This is a little bottle I got. I just put some water in it. And what this does is it gives a lovely brown crust. So I give it a good soaking. And now that's ready for the oven. Into the oven it goes. Now, after 35 minutes in an oven at 180, the bread has been cooked. Now this is how we check the bread. We take the bread out of its box and just tap the bottom. If the bread sounds hollow, the bread is ready. This is the recipe for the bread. I hope you all enjoy. Thank you.